In this tutorial, I'll show you how to use the Toon shader in Blender. The model I'll be using is from Poly Pizza. The link is in the description. The keys I'm using are in the bottom right corner of the viewport. This will work in Eevee and cycles. I split the viewport and open the shader editor. I start by deleting the principal BSDF shader and adding the diffuse shader. I do this because I don't want the specular highlights from the principal BSDF shader. I connect the diffuse shader to the material output. I'll reconnect the materials in a moment. I add a shader to RGB node, which will allow me to use a color ramp to add effects to the object. I then add the color ramp, setting the interpolation to constant. This interpolation makes the entire object black, but if I move the white color stop, I can now change the areas where the object is black and where it is white. If I change the black color stop to a mid-tone gray, I can now use this for my shadow. In order to mix together the shadows and the base color materials, I need to add a Mix RGB node and set it to multiply. As I change the white color stop, I can see the effect on the object. If I change the factor of the Mix RGB node, I can affect how light or dark the shadows are on the object. I select the nodes and join them with Ctrl J. I can now right-click and rename the frame. I'll now make some highlights. I add a glossy shader and then copy and paste the shader to RGB and color ramp. I copy the Mix RGB node and change the blend mode to Add. I then connect the second color ramp and the first Mix RGB node. I change the gray color stop to black. When I move the white color stop, I can change the highlights. If the highlights are too harsh, I can change the color on the glossy shader. I can also adjust the brightness of the highlights by adjusting the factor of the Mix RGB shader. I select the nodes and join them with Ctrl-J. I can now right-click and rename the frame. I'm using an HDRI for my lighting, so as I move the object around, I can see how the lighting affects the shading. I can now add an outline quite simply by using a modifier. I won't be going into depth about this modifier, but if you want a separate video for this modifier, just let me know in the comments. To use the line art modifier, I need to add a grease pencil object. For simplicity, I'll be using a stroke. In edit mode, I select the entire stroke and delete the points. In object mode, I make sure I have the stroke selected and add the line art modifier. For the source type, I'll choose the object, and then choose the astronaut mesh for the source object. For the target layer, I'll choose lines, and the target material will be black. This just adds a black solid line to the object using the stroke. You can change any of these parameters by going into the Material Properties tab. Under the Style menu, I can change the line thickness and opacity. In order to clean up the outline, I'll activate Remove Doubles and Overlapping Edges as Contour. This may not be necessary depending upon the object. For this particular object, I can clearly see that some edges don't have an outline. This is actually not the case. If I go into Camera View and move the model, I can clearly see the outline. If you have a request for a tutorial, a question, or a comment, feel free to leave a comment below the video. If you're interested in learning more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.